Well, the Senators have officially clinched a playoff position, and their captain, Brady Tkachuk, has missed the last 5 games with an upper body injury. Now, I asked General Manager Steve Staios if the playoffs started tomorrow, would Tkachuk be available? And he said, I think so, yes. Now, the Senators have 4 games left in the regular season. Bruce, how do you think they approach using their captain?
I think you forgot, Claire, that was not a definitive, I think so, yes. I think you have to look at the situation, and what concerns me, Claire, is he was supposed to make the trip to Columbus, and he didn't. And that tells me that Brady Tkachuk, it maybe isn't as close as we think. You have to look at the situation now, Claire. You cannot choose your opponent in the playoffs. You don't know who you're going to face, right? And it doesn't matter, quite frankly, who you face. But in a situation with Brady Tkachuk, we know he was injured at the Four Nations face-off because he was playoff Brady Tkachuk. And fans in Ottawa have been waiting what feels like a lifetime to see Brady Tkachuk in the playoffs. If you play him in what is, quite frankly, a bit of a meaningless game, it's worth nothing more than positioning next week, because you are in against either the Chicago Blackhawks or Carolina Hurricanes, then you're putting Brady Tkachuk at risk. In my opinion, leave him out until game 1 of whoever you face. Give him time to rest. It's pretty clear, Claire, that he was playing with something before he suffered this upper body injury, because we had talked here about the hip injury that he had. My sense is that the discussion internally right now is there really any sense in playing Brady Tkachuk in any of the final 4 games of the regular season? I think if you ask Tkachuk himself and give him the choice, he's going to suit up against Montreal Canadiens on Friday night. But what they have to discuss with Brady Tkachuk is that the smartest decision medically? I think 100%, Claire. You know what? Put him out in game 1 of the playoffs. 3 weeks missed, so what? He'll be just fine.
And I was going to say, if the Senators play on April 20th, Brady Tkachuk will get 3 weeks rest since he last played, which was March 30th. Now, I put a poll out on X asking Senators fans who they'd want to see in the first round of the playoffs. If the playoffs did start tomorrow, they would see the Toronto Maple Leafs. Well, almost 80% of over 1,500 votes said, Senators fans, they said they want to see the Toronto Maple Leafs. What do you think about that response, and do you think that's a good matchup?
Well, I too answered the Toronto Maple Leafs in your clickbait poll, Claire. Look, here's what I think is. I think if you injected some truth serum into the people in that dressing room, they tell you they want the Toronto Maple Leafs too. They swept the Toronto Maple Leafs during the regular season. They probably never played better hockey against the Toronto Maple Leafs. I think people in Ottawa want to slay the dragon. I think that's why they want the Toronto Maple Leafs. They remember the playoff exits in the early 2000s with Jacques Martin behind the bench, right? Now and Daniel Alfredsson as captain. Now you've got Jacques Martin back in the organization and Daniel Alfredsson as the captain, with a culprit from the other side as your head coach in Travis Green, who played a key role for the Leafs in those battles of Ontario. I look at this and I think the Senators want the Leafs because they think they can beat them. One of the things I've liked about what I've heard this morning is that I wondered if there might be a massive, oh God, we made it, right? After they qualified for the playoffs, yeah, and be satisfied with that. But listening to Tim Stützle and Thomas Chabot and Drake Batherson last night, it's not about just getting there. It's about making the next step. And I think they feel, and I do think they feel this internally. And I know the fans want it. I know Cyril Leader talked about it, because there has not been a Battle of Ontario since 2004. You need to reignite that rivalry a little bit, and there'd be nothing like a spicy playoff series. And a playoff series, Claire, with Brady Tkachuk.
You know what? And if players had a sense of relief, I think the Senators fans would have been justified in seeing it, because it's been 8 years, Bruce, since the Senators have made the playoffs. Now, when we heard General Manager Steve Staios speak this morning, he said this is just step 1, suggesting step 2 is about, making a deep playoff run. But one of the things he also said when asked about what's allowed them to make the playoffs, he said we needed to change the standard of how things were done here. In your opinion, reflecting on all of these years, why was this the year they made the playoffs?
Stability. This organization just needed a little stability. And I know that his nickname is Steady Steve Stales, but I think he steadied the ship a little bit, Claire. You know, a lot went on in those 8 years. Players came, players would go. We saw different faces. We saw Erik Karlsson and Mark Stone and the likes of those players leave. There was the whole off-ice drama between Mike Hoffman and Erik Karlsson's wife. Things happened here that didn't happen in other organizations. And I think one of the things that Michael Andlauer did when he took over was he brought in a different standard. And when he brought in Steve Stales, if you talk to Steve Stales and Michael Andlauer, and I'm sure you've noticed, they talk the same. Like they're literally the same person in different bodies, and because they think the same way and they understand how things have to be run. And I look at them, and I think that the one thing that Steve Stales wanted to do, and he said it this morning, Claire, was change the mix a little bit. Look at it from 10,000 feet, and then make your decisions. And there were a lot of people concerned. Number one, he went and got Linus Ullmark. Number two, I think what will be a huge move for this organization was moving on from Josh Norris and bringing in Dylan Cousins. He took that little stab at the core just to send the message to everybody else who I thought were a little too comfortable around here that things are going to change.
Now, one thing also, when you think about this team, Bruce, you've covered them since day one. Now, the last time they made the playoffs was in 2017. They lost in the Eastern Conference Final to the Pittsburgh Penguins. You covered that series. After they lost that game, did you think that this market would be waiting another 8 years to make the playoffs again?
No, not a chance, because especially the week before they went to Sweden during that 2017-18 season, they got Matt Duchene from the Colorado Avalanche. Then the next weekend, after he arrived in Ottawa, went to Sweden and swept the Avalanche and came home, and I think in the top spot in the East Division at that point. You look at what happened after that trip, this organization completely fell off the cliff. And you look at what's happened here and what's gone on that hasn't happened in other marketplaces. The club went into a total rebuild in February 2018. That means the Senators were forced to say goodbye to a lot of players. Even when they went into that rebuild, Claire, I never thought it would take 8 years. But I can tell you, 8 is enough. It's time for them to hold playoff games again. I thought Cyril Leader's sort of perspective was interesting this morning. Was we used to take making the playoffs for granted. Nobody takes it for granted around here anymore, Claire.
So I know we've already touched on Brady Tkachuk and the fact that maybe he sits until they make the playoffs. I could see Nick Jensen also getting a bit of time off as he deals with an injury. Nick Cousins is an interesting one because he's been out since January 25th, actually got injured against the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's been skating the last week and a half or so in a yellow non-contact jersey. He won the Stanley Cup last year with the Florida Panthers. If he's in the Senators lineup for game one against whoever, what could he add to this team?
Well, he's a pest, Claire. And that's the best thing you can say about him. He gets under other people's skin. You know, I do think that Cousins is hoping to play on Friday night against the Montreal Canadiens. That might be a little optimistic, but he will get a practice on Thursday. And if he takes some contact, that possibility exists. But as I said to you before, Claire, if Nick Cousins plays, it's only because of his hard work that he's put in to get back in this lineup. You talk to people in there, Claire, he has worked tirelessly to get back in here. And he didn't play in every playoff game for the Florida Panthers last year, but when he did, he had a presence. And that's what the Ottawa Senators need on their fourth line is they need a little bit more of a presence. They need someone who's a little bit hard-nosed, who's not afraid to, get dirty a little bit and win those battles in the corner and make life difficult against their opponents. That's what the playoffs all about, Claire. And that's the reason they signed him, was for this time of year, and getting him back to me would be a massive bonus.
Well, the Senators know that they're in the playoffs now. These 4 remaining regular season games are all about positioning, and their next one will be against the Montreal Canadiens, who they have not beat this season.